Karen stood on the edge of my lawn, phone in hand, screaming that my fence was illegal. Within minutes, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up. But what he discovered next would flip the entire situation and leave Karen speechless. The late afternoon sun was still high enough to cast sharp shadows across the street when the shouting began. I had just stepped off the ladder after finishing the last panel of our new cedar privacy fence. My hands still smelled like stain and sawdust when I heard the unmistakable voice of Karen, our neighborhood's self-appointed rule enforcer. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" I turned and saw her marching down the sidewalk toward me, floral blouse flapping with every angry step. Her phone was already out, recording as if she had caught me robbing a bank instead of building a fence. "This fence is illegal," she shouted, loud enough for every neighbor within 3 houses to hear. "You're in violation of HOA Regulations Section 3.2. This is coming down today or I'm calling the police." I wiped my hands on my jeans and tried to stay calm. "Karen, we submitted the plans months ago. The HOA approved it. I have the email and the signed county permit. Everything is above board." Karen's face twisted as if I had personally insulted her. "I never approved it and I am the board," she snapped. "That's not how it works," I said, trying not to laugh. "There's a whole board and they signed off on this. You were even copied on the approval." She pointed her phone closer to my face. "This fence is ruining the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I'm giving you one last chance before I escalate this. You have until tonight to take it down or I'm getting the authorities involved." My wife Anna came out of the house at that moment, holding the printed permit in her hand. "Karen here," she said as calmly as possible. "This is from County Code Enforcement. They inspected the posts, the setbacks, everything. It's all legal." Karen didn't even look at the paper. "Fake," she barked. "You probably photoshopped that." At that point, I knew there was no reasoning with her. I shrugged and turned back toward the yard. "Do what you need to do, Karen." Her face went red. She jabbed at her phone screen and put it on speaker. "Yes, 911? I'd like to report an illegal construction and trespassing in progress. Yes, right now. They are violating city code and refusing to comply." I froze, disbelief turning to anger. "You're calling 911 over a fence?" I asked. Karen glared at me with a kind of smug righteousness. "We'll let the sheriff sort it out." Across the street, I saw our neighbors, the Millers, peeking through their curtains. A couple of kids on bikes slowed down to watch. The neighborhood grapevine was about to go into overdrive. Anna sighed. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. 10 minutes later, we heard the distant hum of tires on asphalt and saw the unmistakable flash of blue and red. A county sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly down the street and stopped right in front of our driveway. Karen waved her arms dramatically as the car came to a stop, as if flagging down a rescue team. "Officer. Over here." The door opened and out stepped a broad-shouldered sheriff's deputy in a tan uniform and aviator sunglasses. He adjusted his hat as he approached. The lights on his cruiser painted streaks of color across our fence, giving the whole street a strange, surreal glow. "All right," the sheriff said in a measured voice, looking from Karen to us. "What's the emergency here?" Karen leapt into action, pointing at the fence like it was contraband. "These people put up an illegal structure. It's against HOA rules, they refuse to take it down and they're threatening property values. You need to cite them right now and order it removed." The sheriff's brow furrowed. He turned to me. "Sir, is that true?" I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice level. "No, sir. We have full approval. We followed every step legally. I have the permit right here if you'd like to see it." Anna stepped forward, holding out the papers. The sheriff glanced at them but didn't take them yet. He studied Karen for a moment, his expression unreadable. "All right," he said slowly, "let's start by looking at that documentation." I felt a flicker of hope. Finally someone neutral would look at the facts. Karen crossed her arms and rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath. The sheriff reached for the papers. "Let's see what we're dealing with here." As he began reading the permit, the whole street went quiet, waiting to hear whether he would side with Karen or with us. The sheriff stepped closer to the fence, holding the papers in one hand. The sun caught the edge of his badge and for a second the glare bounced across Karen's face. He read silently for a moment, his thumb tracing over the signature at the bottom of the permit. The street was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of his cruiser's engine. "This says you filed with County Code Enforcement and got approval last month," the sheriff said finally, glancing up at me. "That's correct," I replied. "We even waited until the inspection passed before finishing the build." Karen snorted. "That can't be right. There's no way the county approved that height. It's way taller than what's allowed. Look at it. The sheriff turned, squinting at the fence. 6 feet on the side lot line, right? He asked. Yes, sir, I said. Exactly to code. I even measured twice before digging the posts. Karen stepped closer, pointing aggressively. He's lying. This is clearly over 7 feet. Just look at it. The sheriff raised a hand to calm her. Ma'am, do you have any measurements or documents to back that up? Karen blinked, thrown off by the question. Well, no. But I know the rules. I'm on the HOA board. We wrote them. I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Karen, you were removed from the board in April. The HOA president emailed everyone about it. Karen spun toward me, furious. Lies. I still sit on the rules committee. I can call a violation anytime I want. The sheriff looked between us. Do you have documentation of your position, ma'am? Karen's phone wavered in her hand. I don't need to show you that. Everyone knows I run things around here. The sheriff's expression stayed calm but grew noticeably firmer. Ma'am, I need facts, not assumptions. Right now, all I see is a signed permit and a legal fence. Karen's face flushed crimson. You're just taking their side because they're smiling and playing innocent. This is what they do. They sneak things past the board. It's my job to hold them accountable. Anna finally spoke up, her voice steady. Karen, nobody is sneaking anything. You were copied on the email approving this fence. You just didn't read it. Karen turned her fury on Anna. Don't talk to me like that. This is MY neighborhood. I built its reputation. I saw the sheriff's posture shift slightly. His hand rested casually near his belt, not threatening but ready. The tension was building fast. Ma'am, he said, his voice lowering, you called 911. That's an emergency line. I need to know if there's any actual threat or crime happening here, because right now, all I see is a property dispute. Karen's jaw dropped. Property dispute? This is a violation. That is a crime. Not unless it violates local or state law, the sheriff said. HOA rules are a civil matter. If this fence was approved, there's nothing criminal here. The neighbors murmured. I caught a few of them filming from their porches, phones discreetly raised. Karen grew more frantic. If you won't do your job, I'll press charges myself. I demand you order them to take it down right now. The sheriff held up a hand. Ma'am, you can't demand anything without proof. Do you have proof? Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around as if hoping someone would step in to support her. But the neighbors just watched, silent, some shaking their heads. I don't need proof. Karen yelled. I've been here 20 years. I know what's allowed and what isn't. The sheriff's expression hardened. Ma'am, that's not how the law works. If you can't provide proof, this call could be considered a false report. Karen took a step back, suddenly less sure of herself. False report? Are you threatening me? I'm informing you, the sheriff said evenly. Filing a knowingly false emergency call is a misdemeanor in this county. So let me ask again, do you have documentation showing this fence is illegal? Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Not on me, she said finally, her voice quieter. The sheriff nodded slowly, then reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 214. Can you confirm HOA board status for a resident named Karen? Last name, at this address. Karen's head jerked toward him. You can't just do that. Yes, I can, the sheriff said, speaking into the mic. We have an escalating dispute here. I need clarity. The radio crackled. Copy that, 214. Stand by for confirmation. For a long moment, the only sounds were the clicking of cicadas and the soft murmur of neighbors. I felt my heart pounding. This was the first time someone had actually stood up to Karen with authority. Karen stood rigid, breathing hard, her phone still pointed at the sheriff as if it were a weapon. The radio came alive again. 214, we've confirmed that resident was removed from the HOA board on April 14th for repeated conduct violations. She is not an authorized representative. The sheriff turned his head slowly toward Karen. The street went dead silent as the words from dispatch echoed in the warm air. Removed from the board. I glanced at Anna. Her eyebrows shot up as if to say, see? We weren't crazy. Karen stood frozen, phone still raised, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words. The sheriff clipped the mic back to his shoulder and turned to face her fully. Ma'am, do you understand what I just said? His voice was calm but firmer now. Karen shook her head violently. That can't be right. Those records must be wrong. I never got a letter about being removed. You were copied on the board's decision, Anna said softly, almost like she was speaking to a stubborn child. Karen spun toward her, eyes blazing. Shut your mouth. You don't know anything about how this HOA works. The sheriff stepped slightly between them, his hand resting on his duty belt again, still not threatening but enough to make Karen take a step back. Ma'am, you called 911 under the pretense of reporting a crime, the sheriff said evenly. At this point I'm seeing no crime. I'm seeing a property owner with proper permits and HOA approval, and a resident without current authority making accusations. Karen's voice jumped an octave. You don't get it? This is MY neighborhood. If people start putting up fences like this, the whole place will look like a junkyard. From across the street, one of the neighbors muttered just loud enough to hear, better than looking like a war zone every time you start screaming. A few quiet chuckles broke out from the gathering crowd. Karen's face turned crimson. You're all against me. You're letting them destroy our property values. The sheriff took a slow breath. Ma'am, I'm giving you a warning. Filing a false report is a criminal offense. If you can't provide documentation right now proving this fence is illegal, you need to stand down. Karen's hands shook, but instead of backing off, she doubled down. Fine. I'll go get proof myself. I'll measure this fence and show you it's over the limit. She started marching toward the fence, phone still in hand, and I instinctively stepped in front of her. Karen, you can't come onto my property, I said firmly. Get out of my way, she barked. I have a right to inspect it. No, ma'am, you don't, the sheriff interjected sharply, stepping forward. If you set foot on their property without permission, that's trespassing. Karen froze mid-step, glaring at me like this was somehow my fault. You can't stop me. Yes, I can, I said. And now you've been warned. The sheriff pulled out a small measuring tape from his utility belt, surprising both of us. We'll settle this right now, he said. I'll measure the fence myself. Stay where you are. He walked to the fence line and extended the tape. I watched his thumb and forefinger pinch the edge of the tape measure, following the wood grain all the way to the top. Exactly 6 feet, he said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Within code. Karen let out a high-pitched laugh that didn't sound quite sane. Oh sure. Your little tape measure says 6 feet. You probably rigged it. The sheriff turned his head slowly toward her. Ma'am, are you accusing me of falsifying a measurement? Karen faltered for the first time. I just think there's something fishy going on. Nobody else seems to care about following the rules but me. Anna spoke up again, her tone calm but cutting. Karen, the rules are being followed. You just don't like that you can't control everything anymore. The neighbors murmured in agreement. I saw one of them, Mr. Patel, lift his phone higher, clearly capturing every second for the neighborhood group chat. Karen's shoulders tensed. Her breathing became shallow. This isn't over, she hissed. If the HOA won't enforce the rules, I will. I'll keep calling until someone does something about this fence. The sheriff's patience finally seemed to thin. Ma'am, if you keep misusing emergency services, you could face charges and fines. I need you to calm down, step back, and let this go. But Karen wasn't done. No, she shouted, startling even the kids on bikes who had been quietly watching. This is harassment against me. I'm the victim here. Karen, I started, but before I could finish, she stormed past me toward the fence again, this time stepping 1 foot onto the grass inside my property line. Ma'am, the sheriff barked, his voice ringing like a command. Step back right now. Karen froze, 1 foot still over the line, her phone raised like she was ready to film some grand injustice. Or what? She sneered. The sheriff's posture shifted. Or I'll have to detain you for trespassing. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Even I was caught off guard. The sight of the sheriff's calm, unblinking face seemed to finally register with Karen, but instead of backing down, she squared her shoulders. You wouldn't dare, she said, voice low and trembling. The sheriff didn't flinch. Try me. Karen's foot stayed planted on the grass. The sheriff's hand moved to his radio again as he said, Dispatch, we may have a trespasser refusing to comply. Stand by. The sheriff's hand hovered over his radio as if the entire street was holding its breath. Karen stood there with 1 foot still inside my yard, her chin jutted out in defiance. She wasn't just refusing to move, she was daring him to escalate. Ma'am, the sheriff said, his voice dropping to a tone that made every hair on my arm stand on end, this is your final warning. Step back onto public property right now. Karen's lip curled. I have every right to be here. This is common property. It's not, I said, my voice tight but steady. We had this surveyed last year. That's my yard. That's my fence. You're trespassing. Stop saying that. Karen snapped. I'm allowed to enforce HOA rules. You can't keep me from documenting violations. The sheriff shifted his stance 1 foot forward. Ma'am, listen carefully. You are not authorized to enforce anything. Dispatch has confirmed you're not on the board. If you do not step back, I will have to place you under detention. Karen let out a bitter laugh. Oh, this is rich. You're really going to arrest a woman for trying to keep her neighborhood from turning into a slum? You're not being arrested, yet, the sheriff said. But you are interfering with a lawful property owner after being warned. That's disorderly conduct. The words landed like a thunderclap. The neighbors began whispering among themselves. Someone muttered, "She's finally gonna get what's coming to her." Karen's face twisted with something between rage and panic. She backed up 1 step, but then whirled around and started shouting again. "This whole block is conspiring against me," she yelled, voice cracking. "You think you can gang up on me just because I actually care about this neighborhood? Well, I'm not going anywhere until this fence is taken down." Anna stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Karen, you need to stop. This is harassment." Karen turned on her, finger jabbing toward Anna's chest. "Don't you dare lecture me." That was the moment the sheriff moved decisively. He stepped between them, his presence suddenly dominating the space. "That's it," he said. "Ma'am, put the phone down and stay where you are. I'm calling this in." He lifted his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 214. We have a subject refusing lawful commands and continuing trespass. Requesting confirmation on prior complaints against this individual." The radio crackled. "Copy that, 214. Stand by." Karen's bravado wavered for the first time. "Complaints? What complaints?" "You've had multiple complaints filed with the HOA board," Anna said softly. "You've been warned more than once about harassing neighbors." "That's a lie," Karen shouted, but there was less certainty in her voice now. The sheriff gave her a long look. "You're telling me there have been no prior issues?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around, desperate for backup from the neighbors, but no one spoke up for her. Across the street, Mr. Patel called out, "Sheriff, we've had to call the HOA on her 3 times this year. She threatened to have my wife's car towed because we parked in our own driveway." Another neighbor chimed in, "She put a fake violation notice on my door about my lawn. The HOA confirmed it wasn't even real." Karen spun around, furious. "You're all lying. You just want to make me look bad because I'm the only one who takes pride in this place." The sheriff's radio crackled again. 214, we show 5 separate complaints against that resident for harassment, including 1 official warning letter sent 2 months ago. The sheriff nodded slowly. "Copy that." He lowered the mic and looked at Karen. "Ma'am, it looks like this is part of a pattern. I need you to calm down and step away from this property before this becomes a bigger issue for you." Karen's hands clenched into fists. "This is a setup," she hissed. "You're all working together to silence me." "No one's silencing you," I said quietly. "You just can't keep threatening people." Karen's breathing quickened. "I'm not the criminal here. He is." She pointed at me like she'd just discovered a murderer in her midst. "Enough," the sheriff said firmly. "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands where I can see them. We're going to resolve this at the station if you can't control yourself." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Karen took a step back, shaking her head furiously. "No. I won't go anywhere. You can't make me." The sheriff took 1 step closer, his hand resting on the pair of cuffs at his side. His voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried over the whole street. "Ma'am, you're leaving me no choice." The sheriff reaches for his handcuffs, and Karen takes a sudden step toward her car, as if deciding whether to run. Karen's hand hovered on the car door handle. The street was dead silent except for the faint buzz of cicadas in the distance. "Karen," the sheriff said slowly, "step away from the vehicle." She turned to him, her eyes wide and frantic. "You can't keep me here. I'm going home. I don't have to listen to this." "You're not free to leave right now," the sheriff replied evenly. "You've been given multiple lawful orders and you're ignoring them. That makes this a detention." Karen's face went pale. "You can't detain me. I know my rights." "Yes, ma'am, you have rights, and right now one of them is the right to stop escalating this." The sheriff took a slow step toward her. His boots crunched on the gravel like gunshots. "Put the keys on the hood of the car and step back," he said. Karen gripped her keys tighter. "No. I didn't do anything wrong." Anna's voice cut through the air, calm but firm. "Karen, just stop. You're making this worse for yourself." Karen's head whipped around. "Of course you'd say that. You've been against me since the day you moved in. I've been against harassment, Anna said. That's all. Karen's face twisted. You think you're so perfect, don't you? With your fancy fence and your little garden parties? This neighborhood used to have standards. This neighborhood still does, I said quietly. And one of those standards is respecting other people's property. That was the final spark. Karen suddenly yanked open her car door and slid inside. Dispatch 214, subject entering a vehicle attempting to leave, the sheriff barked into his radio as he lunged forward. He grabbed the door before she could slam it shut. Ma'am, step out of the car. Right now. Karen gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. Get out of my way. Step out of the vehicle, the sheriff repeated, voice sharp now. The neighbors held their breath. Some had their phones up, recording every second. Karen froze, her chest heaving. She seemed to realize that if she tried to start the car, this would go from bad to catastrophic. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Karen dropped the keys onto the passenger seat and climbed out. Turn around, the sheriff ordered. What? No. You can't. Turn around. The tone left no room for argument. Karen's face crumpled. This is harassment, she cried. I'm the victim here. The sheriff gently but firmly took hold of her wrist and turned her toward the car. You are being detained for disorderly conduct and trespass after warning. Karen's knees seemed to buckle. This is insane, she whispered. It didn't have to get to this point, the sheriff said, clicking one cuff onto her wrist. But you chose not to walk away. The sound of the second cuff snapping shut was like a thunderclap. The neighbors began whispering again, some of them openly filming now. Mr. Patel shook his head and said quietly, about time. Karen looked around desperately. Don't just stand there. Someone tell him this is wrong. No one spoke up. Even the kids who had been peeking from porches earlier were silent now, their wide eyes fixed on the scene. The sheriff guided Karen gently toward the patrol car. You're not under arrest right now, ma'am. We're just going to sort this out at the substation. If you cooperate, this can stay a citation instead of becoming a charge. Karen's voice cracked. This is going to ruin me. No, ma'am, the sheriff said, opening the back door of the cruiser. This might just help you. Karen hesitated, her eyes darting from face to face. For the first time, she looked less like a tyrant and more like someone cornered. Someone who'd built her entire identity on control and now had none left. She ducked into the back seat without another word. The door shut with a heavy thud. Anna exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping. I can't believe that just happened. Believe it, the sheriff said, brushing off his hands. But I want to be clear, this isn't about embarrassing her. This is about getting her the message she refused to hear any other way. He turned to me. Do you want to press charges for trespass? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes, to finally make her face consequences. But when I glanced at the patrol car, I saw Karen sitting stiffly in the back seat, staring straight ahead. And for a second I almost felt sorry for her. Not today, I said finally. Just make sure she understands this can't keep happening. The sheriff nodded. I will. The sheriff radios for backup to take Karen to the substation. But then a black SUV pulls up to the curb and the back door opens. A familiar face steps out, and the entire street falls silent again. The black SUV idled at the curb, its headlights washing over the entire scene. The sheriff paused mid-radio call and glanced over, his hand instinctively resting on his belt. The rear door opened and a tall man in a dark suit stepped out. The air seemed to shift. Anna's eyes went wide. Wait, is that? Yes, I said softly, my stomach dropping. It was Governor Mark Lawson, the sitting governor of the state, standing there in our quiet suburban street like he'd stepped off a news broadcast. The neighbors collectively gasped. Phones were up everywhere now, recording every second. The sheriff straightened. Evening, Governor. Sheriff. Lawson nodded curtly, then turned his attention to Karen sitting in the back of the patrol car. What's going on here? He asked, his voice calm but with an unmistakable edge of authority. Karen's head snapped up. Governor Lawson. Thank God you're here. They're harassing me. These people built an illegal fence and the sheriff is taking me away for doing my duty as HOA president. The governor's face was unreadable as he glanced between her, the sheriff, and us. Sheriff? He said, what's the situation? The sheriff kept his tone professional. We responded to a 911 call about a supposed property violation. After reviewing the documents and confirming the fence is legal, Ms. Karen refused multiple lawful orders to leave the property and attempted to enter her vehicle. For everyone's safety, we detained her. Karen pounded the back of the seat. He's lying. This is a setup. The governor's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you have documentation? Yes, sir. I stepped forward holding the folder. Here's the county permit and the recorded deed showing where the property line is. Lawson took the folder and skimmed the top page, his brows knitting. Sheriff, he said slowly, you handled this by the book? Yes, sir, the sheriff said. Body cams are rolling if you'd like to review. The governor closed the folder and looked at Karen again. Ma'am, you're the HOA president? Karen straightened, her voice suddenly confident again. Yes, sir. And I take my job very seriously. If we don't enforce the rules, this whole neighborhood will fall apart. People like them think they can just build whatever they want. The governor's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Disappointment? Irritation? Ma'am, he said carefully, these permits are signed by the county and legally valid. Your HOA cannot overrule county zoning law. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. But... Furthermore, the governor continued, his tone sharpening, you called 911 for this? You tied up emergency resources because of a fence that was legally approved. Karen's face flushed bright red. It's not just a fence. It's about the principle. Lawson's gaze hardened. Principle doesn't give you the right to abuse law enforcement time, harass your neighbors, or escalate situations until they become unsafe. Karen shrank back against the seat, her confidence draining away. The neighbors were eating up every word, whispering and filming. This was the kind of drama you only saw on TV, and it was happening in their cul-de-sac. The governor turned back to the sheriff. I trust you'll handle this appropriately. Yes, sir, the sheriff said. Karen's voice cracked. Governor, please, you know me. I've donated to your campaign events. I've hosted HOA fundraisers for you. You can't let them do this to me. The governor sighed, a long, tired sigh. Ma'am, he said, this isn't about politics. It's about accountability. You've gone too far tonight. If I were you, I'd take this as a wake-up call. Karen's lip trembled. So you're just going to let them humiliate me like this? This isn't about humiliation, Lawson said. It's about making sure this community is safe and fair for everyone, including them. He handed the folder back to me. I'll be following up with the county commissioner about this HOA's practices. This isn't the first complaint I've heard. Karen's head whipped toward him. What do you mean? But Lawson was already turning back toward his SUV. He glanced at me one last time. You did the right thing documenting everything. Most people don't bother, and that's how situations like this spiral out of control. Thank you, sir, I said, still a little stunned. The governor nodded once and got back into the SUV. The door shut with a solid thud, and moments later the vehicle rolled away, leaving silence in its wake. The sheriff exhaled. Well, that doesn't happen every day. Anna gave a small, incredulous laugh. You think? Inside the cruiser, Karen looked like she'd been hollowed out. Just as the sheriff was about to drive her away, his radio crackled. Dispatch had just received another call from someone in the neighborhood, reporting a disturbance on our street. The sheriff frowned, turned to us and said, Stay here. This might not be over yet. The sheriff's radio crackled again and he frowned. Dispatch, what's the situation? He asked. Unit 214, the dispatcher replied. We just received a report from a neighbor about continued harassment and threatening behavior by Ms. Karen. The caller requested immediate attention. The sheriff exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Stay here, he said, turning to us. This isn't over yet. I need to ensure this individual isn't causing further problems. Karen slumped in the back of the cruiser, still cuffed, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the street. She muttered under her breath, They're all against me. Every single one of them. I shook my head, exhausted. It's not everyone, Karen. You've just made yourself a problem. Anna stepped closer. I can't believe she called again even after everything. Across the street, Mr. Patel and a few other neighbors were gesturing toward their homes, whispering. Someone waved at the sheriff and shouted, She's been doing this for weeks. Threats, complaints, fake notices. The sheriff nodded. Dispatch, I need a full HOA activity report for this block. All formal complaints filed in the last 6 months. The radio crackled as the dispatcher pulled up records. Copy 214. Sending details now. Karen's head jerked up. What? You don't need to check anything. I've done nothing wrong. The sheriff turned slightly to her, voice calm but cutting. Ma'am, these are official records. If you want to clear your name, you'll need proof. Right now, it looks like a pattern of harassment. Karen's fists clenched. She didn't respond verbally, but the tightening in her jaw betrayed her panic. The sheriff squinted at the tablet in his hand as dispatch began sending over reports. Every complaint, every violation she'd filed against neighbors, was listed in chronological order. Each one documented by HOA correspondence, emails, and even photos from other residents. "This is unbelievable," Anna whispered, reading over my shoulder. I nodded slowly. She's been building a case against everyone but herself. Every complaint we heard about her behavior tonight is just the tip of the iceberg. The sheriff looked back at Karen, who was now shifting uncomfortably in her seat. "Ma'am, do you understand the severity of what this looks like?" "This isn't fair," she blurted. "They're trying to ruin me." The sheriff's gaze didn't waver. "You've been warned repeatedly about your conduct. Now multiple neighbors are reporting harassment and disorderly behavior. This is your final warning before additional legal action is taken." Karen's voice dropped, almost whispering. I just want to protect this neighborhood." "Is that a crime?" "No," the sheriff said slowly, "protecting your neighborhood isn't a crime. Abusing your HOA position, harassing your neighbors, and making repeated false complaints? That is." The sound of neighbors whispering, cameras clicking, and the faint buzz of cicadas filled the tense silence. Karen's bravado seemed to drain away with each second. One neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, called out from her porch, "She sent me a violation notice saying my hedges were unacceptable last month. Totally false." Another added, "And she threatened to have my car towed for being in my own driveway." Karen flinched as each accusation landed. She turned to the sheriff. This isn't true. I'm being set up." The sheriff leaned closer, his tone firm. "Ma'am, the reports are from multiple residents, all verified by HOA records. You can't argue with documented evidence." Karen's face paled. Her hands were trembling slightly now. But I have rights." "Yes," the sheriff said calmly. "And part of that is taking responsibility for your actions. You've been given warnings and multiple neighbors have filed complaints. Right now, the system is catching up to you." For a moment, Karen was silent. She looked down at her cuffed wrists, at the sheriff, then at the line of neighbors watching. Something in her demeanor shifted, from defiance to realization that she had truly overstepped. The sheriff's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Dispatch, confirm if any HOA board members have tried to intervene tonight on her behalf." A crackle came over the radio. "Copy 214. No board members contacted us. Only neighbors calling regarding harassment reports." The sheriff exhaled and looked back at Karen. "You've been acting alone. No backup. No authority. You are entirely responsible for this situation." Karen's face twisted with frustration and disbelief. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failed her. Anna whispered, "I can't believe she's been doing this for so long and no one stopped her." I nodded grimly. It's scary how much control she thought she had until someone enforced the rules. The sheriff stepped back, his body language authoritative but measured. "Ma'am, if you continue with harassment or false complaints after tonight, it won't just be citations. You could face legal consequences." Karen's eyes darted nervously. She looked at the neighbors, then at the patrol car. Slowly, the defiance in her posture began to crumble. Her voice was barely audible. I didn't mean. I just wanted to protect the neighborhood." The sheriff's gaze softened just slightly. "I understand. But protecting the neighborhood doesn't mean threatening or intimidating others. That line is clear." Karen's head sank, her hands still cuffed. The street was silent except for distant traffic and the occasional whisper of neighbors. Just as the sheriff began to guide Karen toward the cruiser again, a loud, aggressive honk echoed from the end of the street, and another car had pulled up. The driver steps out and everyone freezes. It's someone Karen clearly didn't expect. Someone whose presence could escalate this chaos even further. The second vehicle, a sleek dark sedan, rolled to a stop at the curb. Its headlights cut through the dusk, casting long, dramatic shadows across the street. All eyes turned to the door as it opened slowly. A tall woman stepped out, sharp suit, professional demeanor, and the unmistakable air of authority. She carried herself like someone used to being obeyed. Karen's head whipped up. "No, it can't be." Her voice trembled, the confident edge from moments ago gone entirely. The woman walked toward the scene, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. She stopped a few feet from the sheriff and the cruiser, taking in the situation. Karen in handcuffs, the sheriff standing firm, neighbors filming, and the quiet tension of a street frozen in disbelief. "Evening, everyone," the woman said, voice calm but commanding. I'm Chief Compliance Officer Margaret Reynolds from the County HOA Oversight Board. I've been reviewing reports of repeated harassment from Ms. Karen over the last 6 months. Karen froze mid-breath. You what? Why are you here? Margaret's gaze locked on her. Because your behavior has been documented and escalated beyond the HOA's internal authority. Multiple residents have filed formal complaints. You've been warned repeatedly. Your actions tonight constitute not just harassment, but abuse of HOA authority. Karen's face paled. I didn't do anything wrong. The sheriff glanced at me. I think this explains why she's been so persistent. Margaret held up a hand. Sheriff, I've been sent to intervene directly. Karen, you will come with me to the Oversight Board offices for a formal review of your conduct. Karen's knees buckled slightly. She looked from the sheriff to Margaret, disbelief etched into every line of her face. You can't just. Ma'am, Margaret said evenly, you've already shown you cannot de-escalate on your own. The Oversight Board will determine the consequences of your repeated misconduct. Right now, your cooperation is mandatory. The neighbors whispered among themselves. Phones clicked, capturing the moment. This wasn't just local drama. This was escalating to state-level enforcement of HOA rules. Anna muttered, she's finally getting the consequences she's been avoiding. Karen's voice dropped to a quivering whisper. I just wanted to protect the neighborhood. Margaret's eyes softened slightly, just enough to make Karen hesitate. Protecting a neighborhood doesn't mean threatening or intimidating its residents. You've been given ample opportunity to comply, and yet you've continued these patterns. Now it's time to answer for your actions officially. Karen's defiance began to crumble. Her shoulders slumped. I didn't know it was this serious. The sheriff stepped closer. It is serious, Karen. Multiple neighbors, multiple complaints. Tonight was just the tipping point. Karen looked around at the neighbors filming. Some were shaking their heads, others whispered in disbelief. The weight of public scrutiny was suddenly pressing down on her. Margaret gestured to the sheriff. Escort her to the vehicle for transport. I'll handle the formal proceedings. Karen froze. Formal proceedings? What do you mean? You will meet with the Oversight Board to review all complaints, discuss potential sanctions, and determine if you can continue in any HOA capacity, Margaret explained. Karen's mouth opened and closed. The confident, aggressive facade from earlier was completely gone. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. You're going to let them do this to me? I shook my head slowly. Karen, this isn't about me. It's about how you've treated everyone here. The sheriff opened the cruiser door. Ma'am, time to go. Karen hesitated, glancing back at the neighbors, then at Anna, then finally down at the street beneath her feet. She moved slowly toward the cruiser, every step a mixture of resignation and disbelief. Margaret walked beside the car, her posture perfectly straight, exuding calm authority. Let this be a lesson. Actions have consequences, especially when they affect the lives of multiple people. The neighbors watched silently as Karen was guided into the cruiser. Phones continued to capture every frame. A few whispered under their breath, finally, or, about time she faced reality. The sheriff secured the door behind her. We'll take her to the substation first, then you can handle the Oversight Board review, he said to Margaret. Margaret nodded. Understood. Thank you, Sheriff. You've managed this professionally, but it's important she faces the official consequences. Karen slumped back in the seat, her hands cuffed, staring blankly out the window. For the first time she looked utterly powerless. The sheriff and Margaret exchanged a brief look before turning back to the neighbors. I know this has been dramatic, the sheriff said, but remember, this is about enforcing the law and ensuring everyone's rights are respected. Margaret added, this isn't personal. It's about community accountability. Hopefully this will serve as a clear example to prevent further incidents. Anna let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. I can't believe it's finally over. I nodded. It feels surreal. But honestly, it's the closure we've needed for months. Karen's muffled protests came from inside the cruiser. This isn't fair. I'm the victim? Margaret didn't respond. She just watched as the cruiser rolled away, the weight of authority finally settling over the street. As the cruiser disappeared around the corner, a final, unexpected sound broke the quiet. Karen's phone started ringing in the front yard, loud and insistent. The caller ID flashed HOA President, and a chilling realization hit the neighbors. Karen might not be finished yet. The cruiser disappeared around the corner, leaving a hushed street behind. The neighbors were slowly letting out breaths they hadn't realized they'd been holding. Then a sudden shrill ringtone cut through the quiet. Karen's phone, still lying on the curb, vibrated and rang insistently. Anna glanced at me wide-eyed. Is that her phone? I walked over slowly and picked it up, the screen flashing, HOA president. My pulse quickened. Could she be calling someone, trying to escalate things even now? I answered cautiously. Hello? A muffled, panicked voice came from the other end. It wasn't Karen. It was another HOA member, one I hadn't even suspected. It's Susan from the board. She wants us to intervene. Karen's in trouble and she's saying we all have to back her up. I froze. The last thing I expected was a board member colluding with her. Susan, what do you mean, we all have to back her up? She's told us she's being wrongfully detained, Susan's voice stammered. She's saying, if we don't do something, she'll make complaints against all of us. She's threatening us. My stomach sank. Even with Karen out of sight, her influence was reaching across the street. Anna placed a hand on my shoulder. Do you think she's serious? I shook my head. Does it matter? She's clearly trying to manipulate everyone, even from the cruiser. The sheriff, who was just finishing his final notes on the incident, glanced at the phone. You should probably handle that carefully. If board members are colluding or interfering, that could reignite harassment claims. I nodded, dialing the HOA Oversight Board's emergency line that Margaret had given us. Hello, this is the homeowner from 213 Elm Street. Karen's been detained, but one of the HOA members is now calling in threats on her behalf. We need guidance. The voice on the other end was calm, precise. Thank you for reporting. That's exactly why the Oversight Board will be reviewing Karen's actions. We'll issue formal notices to any board members attempting to interfere. I hung up, feeling a mixture of relief and tension. Karen might be in the cruiser, but the storm wasn't completely over. Across the street, neighbors were still whispering among themselves. Mr. Patel muttered, I can't believe she's still trying to stir trouble. Even when cuffed, she's manipulating people. I've seen it all, the sheriff said, and that's the kind of pattern we see in persistent HOA harassers. They never stop, until formal authority intervenes. Anna let out a shaky laugh. Well, at least she's off the street for now. I'm not sure my nerves can take another confrontation tonight. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from the Oversight Board flashed on the screen. Thank you for documenting everything. Your HOA complaint files are crucial. We will be issuing official sanctions against Karen and any board members colluding. You're cleared of any wrongdoing. I exhaled, feeling some of the tension finally lift. 4 months, Karen had operated with near total impunity, and now it seemed the system was finally catching up with her. But even as relief settled in, the ringing of Karen's phone on the curb reminded me that she might try another angle. The potential for more chaos wasn't fully gone. A neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, whispered from her porch, she's not going to stop. You just wait, she'll find another way. I hope not, I replied. But even if she does, at least now there's a record. There's accountability. And that's what counts. Anna nodded. This feels like closure. But it also shows how far someone will go to control others under the guise of authority. The sheriff walked over, adjusting his uniform. It's a tough lesson for everyone. You need to be prepared for pushback from people like Karen, and you need to document it. You did the right thing tonight. I gave a small smile. Thank you, Sheriff. Couldn't have done it without your professionalism. He nodded, tipping his hat slightly. Community safety is everyone's responsibility. Tonight, you handled yourself well under pressure. Karen's phone finally stopped ringing, lying silent on the curb. For the first time in weeks, the street felt calm. But the story of what had happened, her harassment, the threats, the escalation, would linger in the neighborhood's memory for a long time. As the sheriff walked to his cruiser, he glanced over at the neighbors. Let this be a reminder, rules and laws exist to protect everyone, not just a single voice in the community. Anna and I stood on the curb, watching the patrol car drive away with Karen inside. The sun had fully set, leaving the street bathed in the orange glow of porch lights and lampposts. The air felt lighter now, yet heavy with the weight of what had transpired. I turned to Anna. Do you think she's really finished? Anna shook her head, a small, rueful smile on her face. Probably not. But at least she can't act with impunity anymore. That's progress. I glanced back at the curb, where her phone still lay, a silent reminder of the lingering threat she could wield even from afar. Then I took a deep breath and finally allowed myself a moment of relief. The confrontation, the intimidation, the constant fear, it had ended. The lesson was clear. Persistence, documentation, and remaining calm under pressure could overcome even the most aggressive HOA tyrants. Just as we started heading back inside, a neighbor from 2 doors down called out urgently. "Wait. You need to see this." From their driveway, they were pointing at a small package left near the sidewalk, addressed to Karen but ominously open with documents spilling out that could implicate other HOA members. Even though she was gone, her chaos was far from over. The small package on the sidewalk was a silent threat. Papers spilled out across the concrete, but the handwriting and formatting made it immediately clear. It was another attempt by Karen to manipulate the HOA and intimidate neighbors. I carefully picked up the documents. They contained alleged violations, complaints about neighbors, and even fabricated reports of illegal activity. The HOA Oversight Board would see them for what they were: baseless attempts at intimidation. Anna sighed. Even in her absence, she can't stop herself. I nodded. But now there's accountability. These won't hold any weight, and any further harassment can only strengthen her case against herself. Margaret Reynolds from the Oversight Board arrived moments later. She walked slowly, scanning the papers I held. "These are what we expected," she said calmly. "We'll be documenting everything." Her actions tonight, combined with this attempt, will lead to formal sanctions: fines, temporary suspension from HOA duties, and mandatory compliance courses. Repeated misconduct could result in removal from office. Karen's phone buzzed faintly in my pocket, a final reminder of her reach. I silenced it. The street, for the first time in weeks, felt peaceful. The neighbors began emerging from their homes. Conversations floated across the cul-de-sac, a mix of relief, disbelief, and vindication. Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head and muttered, "I never thought she'd get this far." Finally, some justice. Sheriff Collins, still nearby, gave a small smile. "You all did the right thing. Documentation, calm persistence, and involving proper authorities, that's how situations like this get resolved." Anna glanced at me. "It's almost surreal. Months of stress, harassment, and intimidation, and now it's over." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. She's still Karen. She'll probably never see things differently. But the system worked. That's what matters. Margaret spoke again. "This is a lesson for everyone, even HOA boards. Abuse of authority isn't just a personal problem, it's a community problem. Proper oversight, documentation, and clear reporting channels are essential. You've set a precedent that protects all neighbors moving forward." I felt a quiet pride. Months of careful record-keeping, photographs, emails, and patient perseverance had paid off. Karen's power over the neighborhood had been dismantled, and this time it was permanent. The sheriff packed up his patrol equipment. "I'll file my final report and the Oversight Board will take it from there." But tonight, justice was served without anyone getting hurt. That's worth recognizing. Karen's absence was tangible. No loud complaints, no angry outbursts, no frantic calls, just a quiet neighborhood finally able to breathe. Anna rested a hand on my arm. "It's strange, part of me expected her to escalate even more. But she's gone and she has nowhere to go now. The authorities and the board have her fully in check." I smiled faintly. "Yes, but we have to stay vigilant. People like her rarely give up immediately. They just find new ways to push boundaries." The sun had fully set, leaving the street bathed in a soft orange glow from porch lights. Shadows stretched long across the pavement, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. It felt like a cinematic ending, quiet, reflective, and just. I looked around at the neighbors gathering cautiously, exchanging relieved smiles and whispered congratulations. Children peeked from porches, the tension in their small faces easing. Even pets, long accustomed to Karen's erratic behavior, seemed calmer. Anna smiled, a mix of exhaustion and relief. "It's done. Finally done." I nodded, holding up the folder of documents as a symbolic victory. "It's over, but more than that, we've set a boundary. This neighborhood won't be ruled by fear anymore." Margaret Reynolds added, "This is a story that others in the county need to see. It's not just about one HOA or one person. It's about accountability, community, and courage. You all acted correctly and responsibly." The sheriff gave a final nod. "Take this moment to breathe. Document everything moving forward, and keep communication open with the Oversight Board. That's how you prevent situations like this from escalating again." I glanced at Anna. "I can't believe it. Months of stress, harassment, and intimidation, and now for the first time peace." Anna placed a hand over mine. "We've learned something too: patience, documentation, calm persistence. And that standing up for what's right even against someone like Karen actually works. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the past weeks release. Karen's control, once so pervasive, had crumbled under scrutiny and authority. And for the first time in months the neighborhood felt safe. As we walked back to our house, neighbors waving softly, I reflected on everything that had happened. This wasn't just about a fence or HOA rules. It was about standing up against harassment, documenting wrongdoing, and trusting proper authority to enforce justice. Karen may still be plotting, still dialing phones, still writing letters. But now, the tools and authority were in place to protect the community from her escalating behavior. The evening air was cool, the street calm. Lights glimmered in windows, a symbol of ordinary life returning. The tension had dissolved into relief, and a sense of justice lingered. For anyone watching or experiencing similar struggles, persistence, calm reasoning, documentation, and involving the right authorities can turn the tide against harassment and abuse of power. Even in seemingly hopeless situations, the system, when respected and used properly, works. We hope this story reminds everyone that standing up against intimidation is not only possible but necessary. Justice doesn't always come instantly, but it does come, and those who abuse authority will eventually face consequences. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor or HOA conflict, remember, document everything, stay calm, and involve the proper authorities. And if you want to hear more real suburban stories where justice prevails, consider subscribing. The street is quiet, the neighborhood safe, but Karen's phone lights up one last time. A notification appears from a new contact, new HOA member candidate. Even as peace returns, a subtle reminder lingers. People like Karen never fully disappear.